Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in just a moment. I can call you up. Yeah. Okay, welcome, everyone. Very excited to have you join us for this morning session on the penultimate day, or not quite penultimate day of COP. This is supporting innovation to build food system resilience across landscapes and waterscapes. And this session will also highlight some innovations that have the potential to improve the food security and climate adaptability of vulnerable farmers. So we're really excited to highlight some great innovations today. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to give a short introduction to our speakers. First off, we have Dina Esposito, the Assistant to the Administrator for the Bureau of Resilience, Environment, and Food Security. We also have Michael Kremer. He is a Professor of Economics at University of Chicago and the 2019 Nobel Laureate in Economics. Next, we have Shakantala Tilsted, Director of the Nutrition, Health, and Food Security Impact Arena Platform of CGIAR, and the 2021 World Food Prize winner. Next, we have Michael Carter. He's Professor of Agricultural and Resource Economics at the University of California in Davis and the Director of the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Markets, Risk, and Resilience. So I have a quick note here. Michael sends his deepest apologies. He's actually not able to join us today. And so I will ask your grace, and I will serve as his replacement as a presenter. And then last but not least, we have Kevan Hamoud. So she is the Administrative Director of the Association for Agro-Extractivists of Beruri in the Brazilian Amazon. She will be joining us virtually. And then we also have a special honor of having a graphic harvester today. This is an artist named Per Wakantitarat, and she will be recording our session and be providing those artistic images to us in a week or two. So be on the lookout for that. Very excited. Thank you. There she is. Hi, Per. So with that said, I'd like to invite Dina up to the podium to give some opening remarks. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. I want to just thank the Global Resilience Partnership for opening their pavilion again to this very important and interesting conversation. And the two Michaels, Dr. Michael Kremer and Dr. Michael Carter, and your institutions for pulling this together. I think it's going to be super interested in hearing your remarks. I lead a bureau at USAID that houses the Feed the Future Global Hunger Initiative. This is Food Day, and I'm coming from that orientation of food security, and it has three main objectives. The first is to drive inclusive and sustainable ag-led growth. The second is to build the resilience of communities, households, systems, and nations to shocks and stresses, and that includes climate shocks. And the third is a well-nourished population, for the particular focus on women and children. It's housed in a newly created bureau we call the Bureau for Resilience, Environment, and Food Security, REFS for short, and it was launched just a few months ago, and it brings under one unified leadership structure our food security and our nutrition security teams alongside our climate teams, our biodiversity teams, and our environment teams. And really, this is a reflection and a recognition of what we and 129 other nations embraced and endorsed about a week ago, which was the Emirates Declaration relating to food security. And we're recognizing through this that we will not solve for the climate crisis without addressing emissions contributions of agriculture, and we're not going to solve for global hunger and malnutrition without addressing climate change, both to mitigate its impacts on production and availability to nourish the world, as well as to help farmers adapt to the new realities. So REFS is an expression of our ambition to drive more win-win solutions that both turn the tide on rising food insecurity and malnutrition and keep us as close as we can, keep 1.5 alive. This panel is going to share, I think, some of the ways we can do that. And I won't delay too much longer. There's been a lot of talking over the last 2 weeks, so I thought I would start with just a couple of questions to think about as COP comes to a close, as we think about driving resilience and adaptation forward. The first is, how are we going to measure adaptation and resilience so that we can better hold ourselves accountable to that result? USAID has a lot to contribute in this space. We've been working on developing resilience measurements in fragile and conflict-affected contexts for many years, and we're ready to help advance this agenda in partnership with all of you. Another question is, how do we define scale when we talk about scaling resilience, scaling adaptation? For me, that has to be grounded in the question of scale to reach whom, or another way to think of it, resilience and adaptation for whom. And that question has to be focused on understanding and addressing, I think, the unique aspirations and needs of Indigenous communities, women, young people, other marginalized groups, and co-creating solutions that are not only appropriate, but actually actionable for those communities within their social and cultural contexts and even their spiritual beliefs. We celebrated right here in this pavilion a couple days ago the locally led adaptation principles, 8 principles that are necessary to change the current situation, which is that only 10% of all climate adaptation finance gets into the hands of local communities. Over 20 countries have signed on to the locally led adaptation principles since they were launched just last year. But why not all 130 countries that signed the Emirates Declaration? Surely the success of one is contingent on the success of the other, and so we have more work to do in that regard. The U.S. and Ireland will continue to champion this cause together along with other development partners and stakeholders who have joined, and we invite your nation and your organizations to join with us in endorsing the locally led adaptation principles. Finally, adaptation and resilience do not require the scaling of just one innovation solution. Resilience is actually about a set of capacities for communities, households, nations, to cope, adapt, and thrive in the face of shocks and stresses. Climate early warning information and related action is part of it. Climate adapted and more diversified crop production is part of it. Instruments that reduce risk, like crop insurance and livestock insurance, are part of it, and diversified livelihoods, behavior change, all of these are part of the solution. Given the many options and the need for related policy reforms to drive a lot of these component parts, what are the priority actions that will have the greatest potential to scale and deliver the greatest return on investment? The answer to some of these questions are really fundamentally to delivering on these commitments that we've made in various calls to action over the recent years. It also is going to require cooperation and partnership. There's really no time to lose, and none of us can afford parallel or duplication of efforts. We need coordinated action behind our shared vision. That's why the U.S. is proud to join the Technical Cooperation Collaborative to advance the Emirates Declaration, and why the U.S. has announced a significant new Aim for Climate partnership this week to drive climate-smart ag innovations forward, including a new contribution of $150 million to the CGIAR to advance climate-smart research and technology, and an additional $50 million to the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, to advance more research and innovation in improving the climate adaptation and resilience of indigenous crops that have traditionally been under researched in recent years, particularly the African indigenous crops, as well as soil health. So I look forward to hearing from the panel and working in partnership with many of you to make good on our commitments to measurably improve the adaptation and resilience of vulnerable communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dina. So I'd like to invite Michael. Would you like to come up and give your remarks?
Great. So smallholder farmers, particularly in low-income countries, are among those most vulnerable to climate change. At the same time, agriculture is responsible for 1/4 to 1/3 of global emissions. Multiple innovations can make farmers and food systems more resilient to climate change, reduce agricultural emissions, or in some cases do both at the same time. The Innovation Commission for Climate Change, Food Security, and Agriculture is working with partners to identify innovations with rigorous evidence of impact and cost effectiveness and develop concrete actions to transition them to scale. We recently, at the beginning of, we're at the end of COP now, but at the beginning, we were very pleased about the announcement of Aim for Scale by Bill Gates and Minister Al-Mary that is informed in part by our analysis and that we're working with closely. Let me discuss a few examples of innovations that the Innovation Commission's helped identify. Has focused on. So first, climate change makes it harder for farmers to rely on traditional assumptions about weather, and therefore harder to plan their agricultural activities. However, vastly more accurate and timely weather forecasts are now possible. In many cases, for example, it's now possible to give a monsoon onset forecast a month in advance, giving farmers time to plan their inputs. Now, procuring forecasts, regional forecasts of the Asian monsoon affecting many countries, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, all the way stretching to East Asia, and similar weather systems in Africa, covering 12 countries with roughly 300 million farming families, is estimated to cost $23 million. There's also strong evidence that farmers adapt their agricultural practices in response to accurate forecasts. The estimated costs, just for one type of forecast, monsoon onset, in India, and just in one country, India alone, are in the billions of dollars. So while we don't have estimates for all the different types of forecasts, onset, rainfall types in all 12 countries of the benefits, it seems quite clear that the benefits are going to exceed the costs by 100 to 1, or more likely. Another example, timely, customized digital agricultural extension services delivered directly to farmers' phones provide a low-cost way to help farmers become more resilient to changes not only in weather, but also changes in pests and soil salinity, soil chemistry, agricultural markets that are already accompanying climate change. In particular, new climate-resilient crop varieties, such as those being developed by CGIAR and others, could bring more benefits to farmers and be more likely to actually be adopted if promotion efforts can be targeted to the farmers who are most likely to need them based on local conditions. Digital agricultural extension can help advance that. Millions of farmers are already benefiting from digital agriculture programs launched by governments, often working with technical partners to use principles of human-centered design and A/B testing to make the messages relevant, accessible, and useful for farmers. Those efforts can and should be expanded to reach hundreds of millions of farmers worldwide. And of course, these can also be combined with other digital services. For example, anticipatory cash transfers, which can help farmers prepare for extreme weather events like flooding. Or the types of insurance contracts that were pioneered by Feed the Future's MRR program, with which we're very happy to be co-hosting. Another example is of another type of innovation, one which I know our USAID is already involved in, is empowering farmers with training or access to capital to become more resilient through rainwater harvesting. So another thing I'm pleased about here at COP is the Arab Gulf Program for Development earlier this week announced an investment to advance research on scaling techniques for rainwater harvesting training in the Sahel. So this is an approach that's been proven effective both in increasing adoption and the rainwater harvesting techniques themselves both provide production benefits and environmental benefits. That's training. Another approach is financial access. So we're partnering with the Nyala Dairy Savings and Credit Cooperative in Kenya. They adopt an approach, and a randomized controlled trial of that approach, of this innovative loan product they developed, showed that it helped farmers become more resilient by allowing them to invest in rainwater harvesting tanks. I think that's the picture on the greener picture on the slide. That increased take-up of loans to purchase the tanks tenfold, the innovative financial product, and it also increased milk sales to the dairy. It reduced absenteeism for girls who otherwise often face a lot of the burden of collecting water, and it did this all with extremely high loan repayment rates. So, why these particular innovations? Well, as I perhaps hinted already, we selected the innovations that we classified as ready to scale based on three characteristics. First, rigorous evidence of causal impact, typically from experimental studies, randomized trials, but not always. That includes evidence that the innovation itself works and that the method of scaling or promoting adoption works. That allows us to be confident that investments will have real impacts for people and for the planet. Second, careful cost-effectiveness analysis. We try to quantify costs and benefits for farmers, consumers, the environment, and carefully compare them to understand the impact of each investment per dollar spent. And third, reaching a large number of people is a prerequisite for having a large impact. So we investigated whether innovations had a credible pathway to scale, either through government services or commercially through the market. And we also looked, aside from these innovations we classified as ready for transition to scale, we also looked at earlier stage innovations. Earlier stage innovation can obviously have a huge return. I'm happy we've got people from CGIAR here. The estimated social rate of return to public investment in R&D is 55%. That's a phenomenal rate of return. If you could invest in the stock market and get a 55% return, you'd be very happy. So we've identified highly promising innovations, some of which could really be transformational. So for example, just to take one, microbial fertilizers, which use bacteria to facilitate crops' absorption of nutrients, can increase yields and help replace synthetic fertilizers, which account for 2 to 5% of global CO2 emissions, as well as causing local environmental degradation. They're already being used at scale in Brazil and some parts of the US, and they've been selected as an Aim for Climate sprint. Investing in testing to adapt these for low and lower middle income countries is already underway in Kenya, and I think could potentially have great potential. So in conclusion, it's great to be here today, and with so many partners that are committed to innovation at the intersection of climate change, food security, and agriculture. The Commission's, we actually just launched a few months ago. We've had to sort of do a bit of our own sprint to get ready for COP, but we've already identified 15 high return innovations, which I think are shown on the slide, but we're continuing to develop the list, both to build it out. People think we should subtract things, please let us know. And if there are governments, and also to develop these in more detail. So if there are governments, people here from governments, other practitioners, or researchers, or people from international agencies who are interested in either helping to develop those innovations, which are not quite at the ready to scale stage, or interested in helping to scale the things that are ready for scale, we'd obviously be very happy to talk and try to link people together. We look forward to working closely with all of you to further develop and scale innovations and reach hundreds of millions of farmers. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Michael. Shakuntala, would you like to come up here?
Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this session. I'd like to use my time to give an example from the Tonle Sap region in Cambodia on community fish refuge and the management of wetlands. And this is this community fish refuge is part of the culture of Cambodia and of the whole delta, the Mekong Delta. But this particular interventions that I'm going to give have been also funded by the USAID Feed the Future when Cambodia was part of the Feed the Future project. So local governments have worked for quite some time with management of community fish refuge. And the name tells you what it is. It's refuges which are in the wetlands, and as the water recedes, this is where aquatic foods have a refuge, and then as the water rises again, then they can leave the refuge and go out into the wetlands from which they are caught by the local communities. What is important is the management of the refuge. Who manages the refuge? The refugees are on community lands and therefore belong to the whole community. But what we've seen that in areas where the communities set up a management group, that you have better management of the refuge and therefore better benefits to the whole community. But interestingly, what we have seen in the community, in the committees that manage the refuge, if women make up a third of the committee members, then we have better management of the refuge and better benefits to the communities. So that's important. And now the governments have taken a decision that they would include 1/3 women in all community fish refuge management. What we've done working together with communities is moving to a holistic food system approach. So the refuge can be used, of course, as a refuge for aquatic life, but also in some communities where it is possible, they use the water in the refuge for drinking water. So setting up plans for purification of the water and then managing the level of the waters, so how much can be used for other purposes than the refuge. And working with the members of the committee that take care of the refuge, we have been able to move out within the communities and then include other sorts of interventions that fit within the homestead. For example, homestead vegetable gardening, working with partners like, for example, World Vegetable Center and local partners, but also establishing with the communities and at the household level homestead ponds, which are used for pond polyculture, especially in the dry season. These changes, what we have seen in recent years and have monitored in recent years, that there are changes due to the use of water in the Mekong River by those upstream, by countries upstream and communities upstream, but also we've registered the warming of waters in the wetlands. And what we've also registered with these changes is that the diversity of aquatic life within the wetlands has been reduced. So the communities spend much more time having to catch the same amount of fish and other aquatic animals that they can catch. They spend much more time. Their income has been reduced. And also what they are noticing is that on the whole, the water levels in the delta has been reduced. And these changes Some of it climatic, but some of it man-made by use of the waters by other communities upstream, other countries upstream, mean that solutions have to be put in place because the fish and other aquatic animals that stem from the wetlands of the Tonle Sap make up a very large proportion of the food, of the aquatic foods that's eaten across Cambodia. And also, in this season of plenty, then these fish and other aquatic animals are caught and kept for the dry season throughout the country. And what changes we have to see now with the changes that we are seeing in water levels and rising temperatures in the water in the wetlands, that's yet to be solved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Shakuntala, for that. Okay, so the next, let's see if we can get this up. So the next presentation is, again, as I mentioned before, a presentation that would have been by the director of the Feed the Future Innovation Lab for Markets, Risk, and Resilience, Michael Carter. He sends his deepest apologies that he's not here to give the presentation himself, and I have been nominated, somewhat unwillingly, to give the presentation for him. I am Sophie Javers, the Global Engagement Manager for the lab. So we are going to be talking today, and I use we as the royal we, I'm talking about our lab. We are going to be talking today about bundling genetic and financial innovations for more resilient and productive small-scale agriculture. Next slide, please. So I'm going to wander a little bit so I can see the slides. Makes me feel more comfortable in front of a crowd. The mantra that we have at our lab is risk makes and keeps people poor. We say that all the time as a reminder of why we are developing and testing potentially scalable solutions that mitigate the risk that smallholder farmers face. And so that motivates us. And so we look at economic resilience in particular, and how we define it is that a household's ability to absorb a climate or other shock with minimal damage to both current and future well-being. But as we know, smallholder farmers around the world are anything but resilient. They have their income damaged by shocks. Even moderate shocks have persistent effects, reducing future income as they become decapitalized and as they use costly coping mechanisms like asset shedding to cope with those shocks. And then, of course, more severe shocks compromise future food security. So unsurprisingly, agricultural productivity is dismal, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, as this risk exposure inhibits investment in risky but productive technologies that could increase household income, improve food security, and in this context, given that we're at COP, improve the farmer's ability to invest in sustainable climate adaptive technologies. And what I want to point out on this slide is that we have here a small graph that shows the white dotted line is the kind of control group where the farmers do not experience any kind of shock. And the red is after a mid-season drought, that first triangle. And then the second solid red section is after a catastrophic drought. And that shows you kind of post-shock lack of resilience. So the farmers are not heading back up to that white dotted line. They're kind of stuck, and that's where we get issues of intergenerational transfer of poverty, where people are not able to rebound. So next slide, please. Okay, so we today are talking about a whole bunch of different technologies, water systems, but for this particular presentation, we're just going to be focusing on two technologies that we have been researching that mitigate farmer risk. And I have it set up here as a little teaser for kind of what's coming next. So first of all, we're looking at seeds or genetic innovations. And we have some pros, obviously, with climate-smart agronomic technologies. So they do require a huge upfront investment, usually public investment. The Feed the Future Innovation Labs through USAID puts in a lot of money in developing incredible technologies around seeds. But the marginal cost, and this is a good but, for the adoption of farmers is minimal. And then I'm going to kind of jump over to the financial innovations, and we're talking about index-based crop insurance. So climate and disaster risk finance and insurance innovations are flexible and fast to employ, but can be really expensive for farmers to adopt. And then we're moving back to the cons of seed and genetic innovations. So the improved seeds really are an essential element to boost climate activity of smallholder farmers, but they're not fail-proof, right? The range of risk that seeds can mitigate against is limited. So in this case, they're drought-resistant, but not drought-proof. And then when we bump back over to the pros of insurance, we look at how insurance can, in fact, cover multivariate kind of extreme risks, and that counters the intrinsic limitations of agronomic technologies. And in this case, again, I'm kind of teasing, but but covering extreme drought, but not mid-season drought, the costs of the insurance product are significantly reduced. Okay, so next slide. So that kind of gives you a hint at what I'm getting into next, which is the bundling of genetic and financial technologies to mitigate risk. So can we bundle complementary technologies to unlock climate adaptive investment for smallholder farmers and build up their resilience, economic resilience? So the following evidence and policy recommendations that I'll get to are derived from a rigorous field study that we did that was estimating the economic impacts of the two innovations, complementary risk mitigation technologies, as I mentioned, drought-tolerant seeds, these are drought-tolerant maize seeds that were developed by CIMMYT, and index-based crop insurance. So what we were looking at is that mid-season drought events can lower farmer production by 25%, and that the drought-tolerant maize seeds are developed to protect farmers against that particular peril. And then we also have extreme loss events that can reduce production by farmers by 40, 50% or more, and then we're looking at the index insurance to cover those extreme losses. So this study was a multi-year, spatially diversified research design, an RCT, that was across 2 countries, both in Mozambique and Tanzania, and it was conducted in 5 agroecological zones, and that was to ensure that we covered a wide range of weather events across the study period, which was, I think I mentioned, 5 years between 2017, or starting in 2017, and actually the project is ongoing with several different additional kind of add-on investigations. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we learned. So we did learn that the stress-tolerant seeds alone worked as advertised, and they did protect farmers very well, in fact, from the named peril of mid-season drought. So the seeds, if there was just a mild mid-season drought, the seeds protected the farmers, their harvest, their yields were protected, there was no dip, and they were able to kind of maintain their status or their income. However, the improved genetics were insufficient against the multiple perils that usually strike farmers simultaneously, or in this case, extreme drought. And so can I wander over? Okay, I'm going to wander over here. So what we're looking at here is, this is the control line, and that is no drought, no mid-season drought, no catastrophic drought. And then what we have in the red line are the farmers that were given drought-tolerant seeds only. And so this is a catastrophic drought. And what we see is that the DT seeds failed and left what we're calling kind of a resilience failure here. They were unable to kind of come back from that catastrophic drought event. So what we have at the blue line is that it was the farmers that received both the index insurance and the drought-tolerant seeds. And so they are maintaining that this kind of covers a mid-season drought, so we don't see any dip. And then even with the insurance, they experience that catastrophic drought. But the insurance allows them to not only, you can see this intersection here, make it back to where they would have been before a drought, but in fact, past that. And this little triangle here, we call the resilience dividend, or resilience plus. So we're seeing not just a restoration of income and food security, but we're actually seeing increased income and investment to create this additional piece of positive kind of food security. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm kind of hammering the horse a little bit. What's the cliche? I'm not even sure if that was right. But we find that these technologies not only boost the economic resilience of these farmers, but they create, as I just mentioned, a resilience dividend, again, what we call kind of resilience plus. And what that is that these farmers are confident, right? They have been protected. They know a mid-season drought hits, the seeds will cover them. They know a catastrophic drought hits, they're covered with insurance. So the confidence that they then have allows them to, in advance of any kind of shock, make additional on-farm investments. So when they feel, as they say here, properly protected from risks, they more than bounce back as they intensify investment in improved and climate-adaptive technologies, right? So they, once they experience the positive results of the DT seeds and the insurance, they intensify their investments. They have more liquidity to reinvest, and this is a huge thing here in the case of where we are discussing at COP, is that they're moving away from lower yielding non-climate responsive local varieties, and they are moving towards kind of climate smart ag, and so that not only allows them to kind of maintain or increase their yields, but also become kind of more climate adaptive into the future, which is a huge kind of point when we're both combining kind of issues of food security and climate resilience. And again, kind of that insurance in combination with the drought-tolerant seeds allows the farmers to kind of maintain yields, which has implications for food security. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so kind of if anything, you're here today listening to this presentation, if you can walk out of the room with kind of one message that we'd like to kind of make sure sticks in your brain as you're thinking about development, finance, funding, implementation of programming, we want to kind of point out that the implementation of scale of one-off innovations often isn't enough. And I think that's very clearly illustrated in the case of the drought-tolerant maize seeds, right? It was enough to cover mid-season drought, but not the full range of drought that farmers face. And so kind of the takeaway here is that technologies need to be thoughtfully tailored and combined to maximize their risk mitigation complementarities. So we really need to think about how innovations can be kind of bundled together and not just thrown together because it seems fun to bundle them, but to really think about how they work together and create a more efficient and cost-effective way of creating kind of and fortifying a climate-resilient future for smallholder farmers. So thank you very much. And if there's any questions about this, please come to me, and then I can forward you to the real expert. All right, thank you. And then we have online now our final presenter, and that is Kevon. Okay, hi, Kevon. Can you hear us?
Hi. Olá.
Okay, great. All right, well, we can all see you here. We're very excited to hear your presentation. Thank you.
Obrigada. Não sei. Ok. Infelizmente, eu não falo inglês, e eu agradeço a oportunidade de estar aqui. Quero desejar bom dia a todos. E eu estou aqui para falar sobre fortalecimento de cadeias de valor sustentáveis para gestão ambiental e conservação de áreas protegidas na Amazônia, que é um projeto desempenhado pela nossa organização, a SOAB, que é uma associação de agroextrativistas da Amazônia. Bom, eu me chamo Keivan, sou uma administradora brasileira, sou uma mulher transgênero, Tenho 30 anos, sou amazônida, de base comunitária e atualmente desempenho o cargo de administradora executiva da SOAB desde 2016 e contribuo para a implementação desse modelo de negócio sustentável que tem como base a bioeconomia e a conservação, gerando empregos e renda para populações tradicionais da Amazônia. Quem somos nós, né? A SOAB. A SOAB é uma associação de sustentabilidade socioambiental. É uma organização dedicada à valorização e gestão sustentável da sociobiodiversidade e atuamos como um elo fundamental na cadeia de valor da castanha do Brasil e outros recursos naturais, visando promover o desenvolvimento socioeconômico das comunidades extrativistas. Então, hoje, nós temos atividades que envolvem desenvolvimento sustentável, estamos localizados no Amazonas, e as nossas áreas de impacto, inclusão de gênero, desenvolvimento sustentável, e nós atendemos extrativistas e agricultores de pequena escala, trabalhando com 350 famílias ao longo de 3 unidades de conservação na Amazônia.
Kevin, sorry, I just want to have you pause for a moment. We're trying to get the translation piped out loud into the room here. If you could just pause for just a moment. Okay, yes, thank you.
Olá, Caban, desculpa, eu estou só a fazer a tua tradução de português para inglês e, portanto, podes só fazer uma pausa que eu assim traduzo e digo-te quando continuares? Ok?
Sim, posso sim.
Sim, ok, obrigada. Faz só uma pequena pausa agora, só para eu traduzir o que tu disseste, está bem? Até já.
Certo.
Sorry. I'll try to do my best. So from what it was a bit difficult to follow now, I'll try to follow better, but from what she said, it's like that they have this, so they have this framework for, I need to tell her to repeat. Caban, podes só repetir aquilo que tu disseste agora, acerca do teu framework?
As iniciativas da ASOAB fortalecem a resiliência das comunidades ao capacitar produtores,
Pronto, ela estava a
organizando
dizer...
a produção e diversificando os produtos.
Okay, I'll translate now. So she was saying that the initiatives of ASOAB, they sort of strengthen the resilience of the producers. Continua.
A proposta da SOAB visa equilibrar desenvolvimento econômico com a conservação ambiental, capacitando comunidades para o uso sustentável dos recursos.
And that they increase the capacities of the communities to use the resources sustainably. Continua.
Isso não apenas beneficia as comunidades locais, mas também contribui para a proteção de ecossistemas por meio desses serviços.
Caban, podes repetir, por favor?
Aqui são alguns dos nossos impactos e resultados gerados pelas atividades da SOAB. Os principais impactos gerados dessas ações são geração de renda e valor, redução de desigualdade, maior autonomia de comunidades e fortalecimento de territórios.
Yeah, so these are some of the results and impacts from the ASOAB activities. I think you can read it, but like some of the main impacts are like then the increase in the full-time employments are women, and also like that they support sort of for Brazil, not extractive families. Continue, Caban?
É isso, a gente acredita que semear sustentabilidade é garantir o futuro, Agradeço a oportunidade de estar nesse espaço aqui tão importante, que é estar discutindo essas questões climáticas, nessa sessão da COP. Obrigada.
And they believe that sort of sustainability, it's really important for the future, and they are very happy of being here and having the opportunity to participate at the COP discussions. I'm sorry I couldn't understand everything she was saying.
Sibel, thank you so much for stepping in and acting as an impromptu translator for us. And now we know we need to invest more in some AI technology to make sure that we can have better interpretation services. So we do have a few minutes. If there's any questions for the speakers, happy to take those for the next, I guess we have about 7 minutes of the session. So happy to take some questions, if there are any. Nope. We have some fabulous people here that you have access to ask questions. A Nobel laureate, a food prize winner. Ah, yes, okay.
Hi, I have a question on insurance and just how likely you think it's going to be in the future to be able to still get things like food insurance, because from standing afar and not close to insurance at all, what it looks like to me is it's getting increasingly harder for people who are being impacted by climate crises to actually ensure that homes, for example, are being insured.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we're still, I think we still have time. We'd still have time to be able to use crop and livestock insurance as a tool to mitigate the risks that farmers face. But we are, again, kind of why we need to think holistically and kind of in a way of food systems kind of in its entirety, because if we don't work on multiple levels at the same time, both kind of mitigating micro level risks that farmers face, as well as everything that's going on here in terms of, keeping us at the right temperature, then we're going to see a lot of these technologies fail in the longer run. So this is absolutely an issue where we have to work on multiple fronts at the same time to ensure that the technologies that we're developing now maintain their efficacy, in time. Yes, great question. Thank you.
I can also come in on that one a little bit. I think the issue you raise of access to insurance is a really important one, and often a lot of actuarially fair insurance has pretty low take-up, which just intensifies the problem. Some of the things, in addition to MRR's excellent work, there's a few other things that we saw that seem very promising in the literature. We've been trying to review the literature overall. One approach is an approach that was implemented by BRAC, which was these were customers where they were for their loan product, and they issued a product where they guaranteed a loan in the case of a flood in that case. So that's not technically called insurance, but it performs the same function that you highlighted in your very nice presentation of helping people adjust after and avoiding this sort of sustained downward effect. And another approach that turned out to be pretty effective was allowing farmers who are in contract farming situations to pay to sign up so that they would get a lower payment if the harvest was per unit of sugarcane. If the harvest was good, a higher payment if it was bad. That sort of there's a huge, I think it went from 17% to 70% take up with that alternative contract. I also think that there's another thing that we're looking at is including some element of social insurance. And I think for the worst types of shocks, for the poorest and most vulnerable type of people, that's important. So there's some very interesting work on anticipatory payments for in case of floods that allow people to get themselves, if you get the cash in advance of the flood hitting, even just a little bit, you can get yourself and some key possessions out of the path of the flood. So I think but that does require some external finance, but I think that's justified in the case of these extreme risks to the poorest people. So
A follow-up?
So thanks.
Excuse me, a quick. My name is Gaston Kramer. I'm from Brazil. I'm so sorry that I missed your presentation and Kevan's presentation. I got here at the end. I think it's a wonderful work that you're doing in the Innovation Commission. If you had this in your presentation, I'm sorry, but maybe it's a good space to stress that how you will integrate indigenous knowledges to the innovations that you are setting, and I completely agree. I had access to the 7-1. How do we run this integration? How does get to a level of experimentation, integration, co-production of innovation in the different realities that we have, and the complexity that we have? Thank you.
Yeah, well, maybe it's useful to answer that in part by talking about a few examples. So I mentioned the rainwater harvesting techniques that are being used in the Sahel. Well, this is actually an indigenous technique. So you could say, where's the innovation? That's been around for a very long time. Well, there are certain approaches to, it's an indigenous technique, but it's being used to a modest extent, and it's being used, and there are a number of programs to encourage this, because agriculturally, it's known to be effective, and it's good for protection against risk, and it's also good for avoiding further land degradation. But the training programs the approaches have been used haven't been as successful, in part because in that case, it turned out they were working on some communal lands, and it turns out that helping farmers do this on their own private lands turned out to be more effective. So this was developed in part by local people, in part by researchers who spent a lot of time on the ground, in part by the government, and it's being scaled. Now, of course, as this spreads, you'll need to check and see, is it going to be effective elsewhere? And we can't take that for granted. So that would be actually one of our recommendations, to check that. I mentioned the dairy cooperative. This is a very small dairy cooperative, a few thousand members in Kenya, that pioneered this approach. The next step for them would be to train members and leadership of other dairy cooperatives. Again, these are, I don't know whether to call it indigenous, because most people in Kenya are indigenous in one way or another, but members of the other local communities in how to incorporate this financial product in their set of credit offerings to their members. And again, there's an argument that it requires testing in other areas. So part of the scale up of this is testing. Does it have the same impact elsewhere? So.
I think we're done for right now. Oh, sorry. I think you guys can hear me. I don't need a microphone. That's right, for everyone online. Sorry about that. Well, I wanted to thank everyone for coming today and sharing information about innovation, and I'm really kind of excited about the promise of what's to come. And thank you for everyone online who joined us. There will be resources to follow up at the Resilience Hub. So if there's any information that you're looking for in terms of more information about the Innovation Commission or the Innovation Lab, the work that Shakuntala is doing, USAID's programming around climate and resilience, we're happy to share those resources afterwards. So thank you very much.